All right, let's get right into it. Think about the greatest empires in history. For literally thousands of years, right there, just behind the throne, you'd find this incredibly powerful figure. But here's the twist. By definition, they could never, ever sit on that throne themselves. We're talking about the ultimate insider, one of history's biggest paradoxes, the eunuch.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. It gets right to the heart of the whole thing. This is the massive contradiction we're going to unpack today. See, their power wasn't something they had in spite of their situation. No, it came directly from it.
So, how in the world did that happen? How did people with seemingly no power at all end up becoming so incredibly powerful? Well, it's a wild story. It's all about power, about loyalty, and a level of human sacrifice that's hard to even imagine. So, yeah, let's break it all down. Okay, so before we can even begin to understand their power, we have to talk about the price of admission. And I mean a brutal, physical price they paid to even get a foot in the door. This was a transformation that didn't just change their lives, it reshaped their entire being, inside and out. So check this out. It turns out the timing of the castration was absolutely crucial. It made a world of difference. If it happened before puberty, their larynx, their voice box, it just never fully develops. So their voice stays high, like a soprano. On top of that, their bones keep growing, so they'd often end up being really, really tall. But if it happened after puberty, totally different story. The voice stays deep, but the body starts to change in other ways, losing muscle, that kind of thing. It's just a completely different biological path. And the cost, it was just staggering. You have to remember, we're talking about pre-modern times. No sanitation, no anesthesia, nothing like that. Some historical sources suggest that the mortality rate for this procedure could be as high as 90%. 90. Let that sink in. Surviving wasn't the norm. It was the miracle. So you gotta be asking, right? Why would any ruler sign off on something so brutal? The answer? Well, it boils down to some pretty cold, cynical logic about power. Pure and simple. For an absolute monarch, they were seen as the perfect tool, the perfect servant. And get this, the clue is right there in the name. The word eunuch comes from the Greek eunuchos. And you know what that means? Bed guardian. That was their original, most essential job, to be the completely trusted guard for the most private parts of the palace. We're talking about the emperor's chambers and especially the imperial harem. Okay, so this is the absolute key. Let's look at the logic here from a ruler's point of view. First off, no heirs. That means they can't start their own dynasty to challenge you. Big one. Second, they have no family or noble connections pulling them in different directions. Their loyalty is 100% to you, the ruler. And finally, they were total outsiders. Their power, their status, their very survival was completely tied to the throne. If the emperor goes down, they go down with him. It was basically the ultimate insurance policy against betrayal. And I want to be clear here. This wasn't just some weird, isolated thing happening in one or two places. Oh no. This was a massive, global institution. We're talking about something that stretched across continents and lasted for literally millennia. Just look at this timeline. It really drives home how long this went on. It starts way back at the dawn of civilization with the Sumerians, goes all the way through the Roman and Byzantine empires, hits this incredible peak in Ming Dynasty China, and keeps going right into the 20th century. And here's the kicker. The last imperial eunuch, a man named Sun Yao-ting, died in 1996. 1996. That is well within the lifetime of so many of us. So, if you're picturing them as just quiet servants in the background, you've got to throw that image out. Especially in imperial China, these guys were running the show. They commanded entire armies. They ran huge bureaucracies from inside the Forbidden City. And they were responsible for some world-changing innovations. Think about it. Kylin, credited with inventing paper. The legendary Admiral Zheng He, who led those gigantic treasure fleets all the way to Africa, he was a eunuch too. It's just incredible. Now, over in the Ottoman Empire, things got even more complex. They had this very strict hierarchy, and it was based on race and politics. You had the white eunuchs, who were usually from Europe. They handled the day-to-day administration of the palace. But the real power, the serious influence, was with the black eunuchs from Africa. Why? Because they guarded the imperial harem. Their leader, the Kislara Ah, which means chief of the black eunuchs, was one of the most powerful people in the entire empire. We're talking right behind the sultan himself and his number two, the grand vizier. That's how high they could climb. The Byzantines.
Now, they had a really unique take on the whole thing. They almost saw eunuchs as a kind of third sex. In their deeply religious society, where celibacy was becoming a big deal, this physical state was actually seen as a plus. It was thought to bring them closer to the angels, who were, sexless. And this special spiritual status opened up doors that were closed to everyone else. They could become legendary generals, like the famous Narcissus, or even rise to be the Patriarch of Constantinople, the head of the entire church.
All right, so we've talked about political power, military command, but that same biological change took a completely different and maybe even stranger turn in Europe. We're not talking about controlling empires here. We're talking about controlling an audience through high culture.
So, remember how the Byzantines saw them as being closer to angels? Well, what if that angelic quality wasn't just a spiritual idea? What if you could actually hear it? That question, that's what leads us into the incredible world of the castrati. So here's the science behind it, and it's fascinating. You take the same pre-puberty procedure, but instead of for court service, you do it for musically talented young boys. Here's what happens. Their voice box, the larynx, stays small and flexible, just like a child's. But the rest of their body, especially their rib cage and lungs, grows to full adult size. So you end up with this impossible combination, a child's vocal instrument powered by the lungs of a grown man. The result? A voice with a power, a range, and an agility that was literally superhuman. Nothing else could touch it.
And these singers, the castrati, they became the absolute rock stars of the 18th century. I'm not exaggerating. Guys like Farinelli were international superstars. Audiences went crazy for them, royalty showered them with fortunes. It was this life of unbelievable fame and glory. But you can't forget, it was all built on that exact same foundation of profound physical sacrifice and being a social outsider.
Okay, so we've journeyed from ancient palaces to Baroque opera houses. Where does that leave us? What's the real takeaway here? What does this whole story, which has been kind of hidden in the shadows of history, tell us about power itself?
At the end of the day, it all comes back to one simple, ruthless idea. This was a brutal solution to a monarch's biggest nightmare: betrayal. By manufacturing an entire class of powerful people who literally had nowhere else to turn, whose entire existence depended on the throne, rulers built the perfect firewall to protect their own power.
And just one last reminder, this isn't some dusty, ancient history we're talking about. The whole system was only officially ended in China in 1924. And when Sun Yao-ting, the last imperial eunuch, passed away in 1996, that wasn't just the end of his life. It was the final quiet closing of a 4,000-year-old chapter in the human story. For good. So, this entire incredible history of sacrifice, of influence, of loyalty born from powerlessness, it leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. When you think about ambition, control, and what people are willing to do to get it, what price is truly too high for power?